I woke to a suffocating darkness, thick and cold as the grave. A chill slithered down my spine, coiling tighter with each breath. Drip, wet, drip, cold, drip. Rain? No, a sprinkle, but inside, drip. No sand. My fingers dug into it, gritty and damp. Drip, drip. Damn it. Another hangover. This one worse than the others, dragging me down like a stone in deep water. Drip, drip. What had I done? Drip. My body ached as if broken by a runaway train. Drip. No, I wasn't hit by the train. I was the train, derailed, twisted, and shattered. A laugh, bitter, hollow, scratched its way from my throat, but even that hurt. Ha! Ouch! Drip, drip. The heavens themselves wept for my ruin, but their pity was venomous. The drizzle turned to a downpour, pounding the earth as though it wished to bury me beneath its weight. The rain, relentless, screamed in my ears, clawing at my skull. I lay face down, the sand clinging to me, half buried. My eyes cracked open, seeing nothing but wet, black earth. I tried to rise, but my limbs were leaden. With great effort, I pushed myself up, only to be assaulted by a wave of nausea, rising like bile in my throat. I could vomit at any moment. Where was I? Through the curtain of rain, I saw it. A vast lake spread before me like a sheet of dark glass, its surface broken only by the rise of a distant mountain. Behind me, the forest loomed, dense, tangled, with a path that cut through it like an open wound. Lost. I was lost, cast into this forsaken landscape like a shipwreck. I should have known better than to drink again. The bar, the fog of memory, a contract? For a moment, I tried to piece it together, but my mind was fogged, adrift. The rain softened, now a whisper against my skin. My gaze fixed on the forest. The path beckoned, but something about it chilled me to the bone. A tree to the left of the path caught my attention. Its roots twisted around the trunk like a noose around a neck. I shuddered, a primal unease settling over me. The nausea ebbed, leaving me weak but functional. I staggered to my feet, my steps unsteady, drawn toward that damned tree. My foot caught on something. I couldn't tell what, maybe nothing at all. As I fell, my hand struck the bark. That's when I felt it. Something thick, cold, unnatural. Not rain, no, something worse. A white, viscous substance dripped from the branches, and before I could pull away, it seeped into my skin. My breath caught, and a searing pain ripped through me, like 1,000 needles piercing every inch of my flesh. I burned. I shook uncontrollably as if possessed by a fever from the depths of hell. My legs crumpled beneath me, and I collapsed, gasping for breath. My left hand, glowing, bright red, searing as if fresh from the forge. I tried to lift it, but the agony shot up my arm, unbearable, unholy. I screamed. The smell of burning flesh, my flesh, filled the air, even through the rain. My skin peeled away, exposing the bone beneath, raw and bloody. And then the metal. Was it always there, embedded in my flesh? The metal began to melt, dripping like molten iron from the exposed bone, pooling at my feet. The pain was maddening, the nausea rising, suffocating. I vomited, a thick black bile that splattered onto the sand. Then, silence. The darkness took me. The world twisted around me, folding in on itself like a nightmare that refuses to let go. Shapes warped in the shadows, bending and curling until a figure emerged, a grotesque caricature of humanity, a jester with limbs too long and a smile too wide. Its painted face stretched in a grin that was more hunger than humor, eyes glinting like glassy dead things caught in a flicker of candlelight. "Welcome," it whispered, the sound dripping like oil, "to my world." It leaned close, too close, its breath foul, like something pulled from the bottom of a grave. "You may rest here a while, boy, but soon, oh, very soon, you will walk into a world of magic, where the air smells of fear and the ground trembles for madness." I tried to move, to escape, but my body was paralyzed, locked in place like a marionette with its strings cut. The jester cackled, the noise high-pitched and manic, filling the air like shattering glass. And as you lay there, helpless, the boy in you consumed by fear, as the monsters feast on your bones, pick you clean until there's nothing left. It paused, its grin widening, the corners of its mouth splitting open as if it would swallow the world whole. "But fear not, my child. The king's men have come to save you from life." The laugh that followed was like nothing I'd ever heard. It was the sound of madness itself, clawing at the edges of reality, threatening to pull me under. I could feel myself slipping, feel the darkness closing in around me. Then, from within its tattered robe, the jester produced a scroll. Old, worn, the edges curling, as if they had been burned by a fire long since dead. "Sign here," it hissed, holding out the scroll, pointing with a bony finger to the dotted line. The smile on its face was too wide, too eager, like a snake coiled to strike. "It's a simple contract, boy, just a signature, and all your worries will melt away." My hands moved, shaking, but not of my own will. I was trapped in that terrible gaze, those dead, mocking eyes. Before I could stop myself, I took the quill and pressed it to the parchment. The ink bled like blood, dark and thick, sinking into the paper, as if the very act was sealing me to something far worse than death. I signed. The jester's grin split wider, impossibly wide, as if it would swallow me whole, and then the world fell away into blackness. When I woke, I was choking on air, gasping like a man dragged from the depths of a lake. Cold water clung to my skin, my clothes damp and heavy, sand biting into my palms. The world spun around me, but something was wrong, different. My body felt lighter, younger. The lake stretched before me, unchanged. The same water, the same mountain, looming in the distance like a sentinel watching over this forsaken place. The rain had eased, now little more than a mist, but the dampness clung to everything, seeping into my bones. I stumbled to my feet, weak, my head throbbing with a memory half-formed, like a shadow slipping between cracks. I remembered something. A figure. Laughter. The contract. I had agreed to something, but the details were tangled in my mind like cobwebs in a dark corner. I tried to pull at them, to unravel the knot, but the more I tried, the tighter it became. My reflection in the lake caught my eye. It stopped me cold. I looked down at the water and saw a man, a stranger, staring back, young, too young. The face was mine, but not the face I remembered. This was a version of me long buried, a face I hadn't worn since I was 25. The skin was smooth, unlined, my hair dark and full, no hint of the years that had worn me down. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. What had that jester done to me? What had I agreed to in that dark, twisted dream? Fragments of the encounter haunted me. The mocking voice, the twisted grin, the cold hand pushing me to sign, and the laughter, that terrible laughter, echoing in my skull. I had signed, but for what? What had I traded? What had I lost? The world around me was the same, but I was not. And the contract lingered, heavy and unseen, like a noose tightening around my neck. Trey Owens, what the hell did you get yourself into this time? The words slipped out of my mouth like a bad habit as I lay there, groaning in the mud, every inch of me screaming in pain. I forced myself up, pushing against the wet ground, wincing as the ache in my body flared up. Then I saw them, 2 moons, hanging low in the sky, pale, unnatural. I blinked once, twice, but they didn't go away. They just hovered there, still and silent. "What the?" I rasped, my breath catching in my throat. I couldn't stop staring. I'm not on Earth anymore, am I? The thought hit like a punch to the gut. "Dorothy, this ain't Kansas," I muttered, a nervous laugh threatening to bubble up, but it died before it reached my lips. I forced myself to my feet, groaning as my ribs protested. My mind kept flashing back to the jester's grin, the contract. Had I really signed it? No time for that now. I needed to find someone. Find answers. Each step sent pain rippling through my chest, but I kept moving, scanning the misty landscape. That's when I saw something. Big. Hulking. At first I thought it was a boulder, but then it moved. Slow. Deliberate. "What now?" I mumbled, dread settling like a stone in my stomach. It came closer, revealing itself. A massive, gray-skinned creature with one single, enormous eye. A cyclops. My blood ran cold. "Damn it, Trey Owens," I muttered, panic rising in my chest. "What did you get yourself into?" The cyclops lumbered forward, its heavy steps shaking the ground. It sniffed the air, and its eye locked onto me. I took a cautious step back, my heart hammering in my chest. "Yeah," I whispered. "This is bad. Really bad." It grunted, not understanding a word I was saying, but the intent was clear. My fists clenched, but I had nothing. No weapons, just my bare hands and whatever luck I had left. "What now, genius?" I muttered, trying to hold back a laugh. The cyclops lunged. I barely dodged, its fist crashing into the ground where I'd been standing. I stumbled back, sharp pain flaring in my ribs. Okay, this is definitely worse than I thought. The next swing caught me in the side, sending me flying. I hit the dirt hard, and something snapped. My ribs, probably. Pain shot through my body, and I couldn't hold back the scream. I lay there, gasping, my mind a blur. The cyclops loomed over me, its eye gleaming with something like amusement. A low, rumbling laugh escaped its throat as I rolled onto my back, broken but still alive. It let out one last chuckle before turning away, leaving me there, soaked and aching. "Yeah, Trey Owens," I whispered through the pain. "You really screwed this one up." Time dripped away, much like the blood oozing from somewhere inside me. I was a mess. Every breath was a jagged knife slicing my ribs apart. the pain worse than any hangover. I lay there in the muck, the last vestiges of the Cyclops' laughter fading like the echo of a bad dream. But the pain was all too real, gnawing at me like a beast, reminding me of my mistakes. I couldn't stay here. If I did, I was as good as dead. The Cyclops was gone, but that wasn't any kind of comfort. I needed help. Fast. My ribs felt wrong, bent inward like they were trying to puncture something vital. I pushed myself up, biting down on the scream that threatened to claw its way out of my throat. The world spun for a moment, the edges of my vision dancing with dark spots, but I forced it into focus. My choices were limited: walk or die. So I walked. The path, if you could even call it that, stretched into the woods like a vein through rotting flesh. The trees hung low, twisted and gnarled, their branches swaying in the breeze, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. There was a wetness to the air, like the whole place had been drenched in sweat. But it wasn't just the trees that got to me. It was the strange shapes darting between them. I saw them in the corner of my eye, fleeting, quick, too quick. The fauna here didn't belong in any world I knew. Huge, bulbous plants oozed black sap, like the earth itself was bleeding. Some of the leaves shimmered, catching the faint light of the 2 moons that still hung above me. The air stank of decay, but there was something sweet beneath it, something sickly, like rotting fruit left in the sun. And the sounds, God, the sounds. Every step I took, the forest seemed to hiss at me, the ground squelching underfoot, as if it were alive and pissed off. Time blurred, the pain in my ribs sharpened with every movement. I don't know how long I walked. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. All I knew was that each step was agony. But I couldn't stop. I was too stubborn to die here, not like this. But then the forest changed. I heard them before I saw them. Low, guttural voices, a language I didn't recognize, but somehow I did. They were close, so close. And then, like shadows creeping out of the dark, they came. Small, hunched figures, their skin a sickly green, eyes gleaming with malice. Goblins. Damn goblins. One of them snarled, and they rushed me, claws bared, ready to tear me apart. Pain exploded in my side as I hit the ground, their filthy hands clawing at my skin, their breath rank and hot against my neck. I felt a boot slam into my side, and I groaned, barely able to keep my eyes open. I was done for. But then something weird happened. Through the haze of pain and panic, I heard myself mutter in a voice that wasn't quite mine. "Is this how you treat your own kind?" The goblins froze. All of them. One of them, the ugliest of the lot, stared at me with wide, confused eyes, its mouth hanging open. Then, without warning, it doubled over and puked all over the ground. Thick green bile splattered across the dirt, and the other goblins, as if on cue, burst out laughing. Yeah, laughing. They howled like it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. One of them was bent over, clutching its sides, tears streaming down its face. The one that had puked wiped its mouth, glaring at me, then shook its head, muttering something under its breath. Another goblin, a bit taller than the rest, though still short as hell, stepped forward. It scratched the back of its neck awkwardly, then looked at me, eyes narrowing. "Our bad," it said, the words thick and broken, but understandable. You come. Meet leader. I stared, barely processing the words. Meet their leader? I should have been dead, but here I was, invited to some goblin gathering like it was a normal Tuesday. My ribs screamed in protest as I tried to stand, but I nodded, if only because it was the only option that didn't end with me in a shallow grave. Yeah, I muttered under my breath, wincing as I stood. Trey Owens, you've really done it this time. I moved, or rather they moved me. The goblins weren't gentle, but they weren't rough either, just efficient. Their small, wiry hands gripped my arms as they guided me through the trees. They said nothing, just grunted occasionally as we passed through the forest that twisted and swayed like it was alive. The air was damp and thick, hanging around me like a wet blanket. It took me a minute to realize where they were leading me, through the thicket, past towering trees with bark like cracked stone, and into a clearing. There, nestled among the dense woods, was a village. Not like anything I'd ever seen before. The first thing that hit me was how simple everything looked, and yet the complexity was there if you knew where to look. Their homes, teepees of sorts, stood tall, covered in hides that shimmered strangely under the moonlight. Feathers and bones dangled from cords, clinking softly in the breeze like tiny wind chimes. Skulls of animals, big, small, some I didn't recognize, were staked into the ground, marking paths or maybe wards against whatever lurked out there in the woods. The scent of herbs, strong, pungent, filled the air, mixing with the damp, earthy smell of the ground. The goblins themselves, they moved with a kind of quiet grace I hadn't expected, almost as if they were gliding through their village. Their skin was a mottled green, dotted with scars and markings. Some seemed tribal, others just battle-worn. Each wore some kind of adornment, feathers, bones, beads, crudely tied around their necks or arms. But the leader, he was different. He stood apart, taller than the rest, though still shorter than me. His skin was a deeper green, almost like the moss growing on a tree trunk. His eyes were sharper, colder, calculating. He wasn't just some brute. There was intelligence there, the kind that made me uneasy. His clothes, or what passed for clothes, were more elaborate than the others. Leather straps wound around his chest, decorated with symbols I couldn't decipher. Feathers, white, black, streaked with red, were tied into his hair, and a large stone pendant hung from his neck. He held a staff, carved from bone and wood, with markings etched deep into its surface. He looked like someone who carried authority, not just because of his stature, but because of the way the other goblins eyed him, with a mix of fear and respect. He spoke, his voice gravelly but calm, in a language I should never have understood. But somehow I did. The words slipped into my mind like whispers on the wind, and I found myself piecing them together as if I'd known them my whole life. "You are hurt," he said, his cold, calculating eyes flickering over me. "But you stand. Good." I didn't know how or why, but I answered back in their tongue. "I stand. For now." He seemed surprised for a moment, his sharp gaze narrowing in suspicion, but it passed quickly. "I am Narshuk, leader." "Trey Owens," I replied, the words spilling from me without hesitation, though I had no idea where this strange understanding had come from. It was like the language had rooted itself in my mind, an instinct I couldn't shake. I wanted to ask him more, explain myself, but a wave of exhaustion crushed me, and the world around me faded. Narshuk's unreadable expression the last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me whole. I woke some time later. Hours, days, I couldn't tell. The inside of the teepee was dark except for the faint glow of embers burning in a nearby pit. My ribs throbbed, sending sharp pain through my chest with every breath, but the searing agony had dulled to a constant ache. I was wrapped in furs, my body heavy, sluggish, like I was fighting to stay awake but losing the battle. I drifted in and out of consciousness. Time lost its meaning. Sometimes, when my eyes would crack open, I'd see shadowy figures moving around me. Goblins, no doubt, though none of them spoke. They brought me food, nuts, roots, herbs, maybe vegetables. The taste was earthy, bitter, but I was too weak to care. I ate what they gave me, slipping back into a hazy sleep, each time hoping I'd wake up somewhere else. But I didn't. When I finally came to, it felt like months had passed. My body was sore, stiff, but I could move again. I forced myself to sit up, gritting my teeth through the pain. The teepee was small, dimly lit, with strange carvings etched into the walls, symbols I didn't recognize. The air was thick with the smell of herbs, the kind that cleared your sinuses whether you liked it or not. I stood, slowly, testing my legs. They held, barely. Stepping outside, I was met with the sight of the village in full light. Goblins bustled around, moving with purpose, each carrying out some task, skinning animals, tending to fires, sharpening tools made of bone and stone. I walked, noticing the details now, their tools, their rituals, the way they prepared food and dressed wounds. Everything was functional, yet there was a sense of something ceremonial in the way they did things. Their village felt like it was rooted in something ancient, something that had survived countless ages, a culture far older than I would have thought. Narshuk found me before long, his eyes as sharp as ever. "You walk now," he said, his lips twitching into what might have been a grin. "Good. Tomorrow, we hunt." "Hunt?" I asked, feeling a chill creep up my spine. Narshuk's grin widened, showing teeth. "Not like any hunt you know. Tomorrow, you will see. The forest. It has its own games." His eyes glinted, and I couldn't help but feel like I'd just been invited to something I wasn't ready for.